All right, welcome to part two. Here we are going to cover the cosine graph, so take notes. Again, hopefully you checked in for attendance. All right, so 4.1 part two. Okay, so basic graphs, and we are covering the cosine graph. All right, so y equals cosine x. Again, I'm going to start off with a table of values, but when we graph cosine, we're not going to actually make a table. We're just going to understand what the basic graph is and then manipulate it as well. Okay, so let's start off with making a table so that we can understand where these numbers come from. All right, so again, I'm going to look at 0. And between 30, 45, and 60, I actually like 60 degrees for cosine because cosine 60 is 1/2, whereas cosine of 30 is square root 3/2, and cosine of 45 is square root 2/2. And I'm trying to avoid square roots because I want to do this without a calculator. So I'm going to use 60 degrees, which is pi/3. Here, let's just do the y values as we go along too. Okay, so cosine of 0 is going to be 0. Cosine of pi/3 is 1/2. Okay, and then I'll do pi/2, all the quadrantal ones again. Okay, so cosine of pi/2 is, oh, actually, cosine of 0 is not 0. Cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine are the x values, and at 0 degrees, it's 1. Okay. And then, so if you didn't make that change, go ahead and make sure you put 1 here. Cosine of 0 is 1, not 0. Okay. And then pi/2, which is 90 degrees. So cosine, the x value is 0. And then I want the angle in quadrant 2 that has the reference angle pi/3. So that would be 2 pi/3. Okay. And since I'm in quadrant 2, that will be negative. Okay. And then pi, the x value there is -1. And then I want the reference angle after pi in quadrant 3, reference angle pi/3, so that would be 4 pi/3. Okay, and I am in quadrant 3, so the x values are negative. Okay. And then 3 pi/2, that's 270 degrees. And the x values there are 0, or is 0. And then over here, we have 5 pi/3 next, and then 2 pi. All right, so here I get positive 1/2, and then here I get 1 again. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the graph of cosine. From 0 to 2 pi. And then here is halfway between is pi. And then halfway between 0 and pi is pi/2. And halfway between pi and 2 pi is 3 pi/2. Okay. And then we see that our largest value is 1. Smallest value is -1. Okay, so 0, we get 1. Pi/3, which is 1/2. Pi/2 is 0. I'm going to do, let me do just like with sine, I'm going to go ahead and let's just kind of zero in on the ones that are not 1/2 or -1/2. So at 0, we have 1, pi/2, and then I'll add these little half things. But you'll be able to see the shape of the graph even if you don't graph these points here with the 1/2 and negative 1/2. Okay, so let's, I don't want it to get too cluttered. So let's just do the 0, the 1, and then the pi/2, 0, and then the pi negative 1. So right there, the 3 pi/2, 0, and then the 2 pi 1. Because really, when you start doing the graphs, these are the 4 basic points, just like with sine. These are kind of the key x values right here from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, so these are kind of the main points here. So here we have this wave graph like sine, except it's shifted, so we see a weird part of the wave. Okay, so but we do have something like this. Okay, and then now let me go ahead and add these 1/2. That way you can kind of see how if I were to just plot all of the points, that they would fall on this curve here. So pi/3, we get 1/2, so that's right there. And then 2 pi/3 is negative, not 2 pi/3. Yeah, 2 pi/3 is negative 1/2. Okay, so 2 pi/3, which is like right here. Okay. And then the next one is 4 pi/3, which is also negative 1/2. So like right there. And then 5 pi/3, which is like 1/2. Oops. Okay. So we have this here. And again, it repeats after 2 pi. Okay, so if I were to extend this to 4 pi, I would get, so let's take a look here at the quadrantal angles. So if you take a look, if you zero in on just the quadrantal angles, we see that we get positive 1 here and here at 0 and 2 pi on the endpoints. So if we were to extend to 4 pi, we would also get 1 here and 1 here. Okay, this wave would repeat over here. Okay, and then I see that halfway between, so halfway between, I get negative 1. So halfway between here, I'll get negative 1. Okay, and then halfway between here, I get 0. So halfway between here, I will get 0. And halfway between here, I'll get 0. Therefore, halfway between here, I will get 0. Okay, and so we see here that we get this graph that looks like the sine wave, except it's shifted. Okay, so and then same thing if I were to go to 2 pi, negative 2 pi over here. Again, on the endpoints, I would have 1 and 1, and then halfway in between, I would get negative 1, and then halfway between in here, I would get 0, and halfway in between here, I would get 0 as well, because it will replicate itself. So I've got that funny kind of the V part or the U-ish part of the wave. Okay, whereas with sine, we had gotten this part, the S part of the wave, right? But for cosine between 0 and 2 pi, then I would get not the S part of the wave, but the U or V-ish part of the wave. Okay, and that's because we're going from 0 to 2 pi, right? If I graph this from negative pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2, then I would get exactly the same graph as sine, from negative pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's talk about some highlights of the graph. So in general, So in general, okay, so y equals cosine x, the most very basic graph of cosine. So it has this graph where you have these 3 points. Okay, so it has this particular graph where you have +1 at the endpoints, -1 halfway between, and then you have 0 between you have 0 halfway between on the left. So here, put this in halfway between on the left. And you also have 0 halfway between on the right. Okay. So that's how I am describing this here. So on the endpoints, you get +1 on the endpoints, -1 halfway between, and then 0 halfway between on the left, 0, and then 0 halfway between on the right. So halfway between here on the right, you'll have 0. Okay, and that's what we observe here. +1 on the endpoints, -1 in the middle, and then halfway between here, we get 0. Halfway between here, we get 0. Okay, so that is your basic graph for cosine, and then it starts to repeat. Okay, all right, so that's it for this video. Next video, we're going to do tangent. Don't forget to check in for attendance.